Hi, I'm Dr. Mollie Marti, and welcome to Resiliency Matters. Today we are speaking with Dr. Renée Boynton-Jarrett, a pediatrician and professor at Boston University School of Medicine. Renée is the founding director of the Vital Village Community Engagement Network, and I am thrilled to say she is also Worldmaker's recipient for the Community Weaver Award. And she's here with us today. Welcome, Renée.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm delighted to join you today.
We have so much good stuff to jump into with your work, but I want to start by taking a step back. As I was looking at your educational history, an undergrad from Princeton, a medical degree from Yale, another doctorate in public health from Harvard, what were some of the early childhood or youth shaping influences to set you on this educational path?
It's so hard to know where things begin. For me, I would say I was so really strongly influenced by my parents and my family. My mom was an educator and a scientist. My dad was a teacher and a writer. They were both deeply involved in our community and in my school as I was growing up. So I always loved education. I loved learning, and I loved social connections and community. And early on in elementary school and in preschool, I really began to experience community. I grew up in a small town in New Jersey, so many of us were in school together from preschool right through graduation and through high school. But many of my peers that I met in preschool and elementary school, who were just so smart, creative, brilliant minds full of promise and potential, really faced what we would now, I would describe with adult language now as social adversities that were cumulative, that were chronic. We all experienced different forms of structural racism. There were numerous material and household hardships, and then there were numerous exposures, familial violence, interpersonal violence, community violence, and different forms of neglect and abuse. And many of my creative, promising, beautiful peers didn't really have the chance to do some of the things that I've had the opportunity to do. So when I arrived in college, I arrived there really with a determination to not have that be the case for all children, to really work to build a society and to contribute what I could to a society that really invested in every child and didn't see any child as disposable or able to slip through the cracks. My experience in my school system, which was undergoing a major school desegregation battle my entire education, was that there was a narrative told about us as students that we weren't really good and we weren't very valuable. And when I arrived in college, the narrative suddenly changed about me. All of a sudden, I was regarded as someone who was smart and valuable and worthy by this larger social narrative. Now, within our school, our teachers and our parents obviously valued us deeply, and I feel like that set me on such a positive foundation. It's other part of my story is that there are many strengths, resilience factors within communities that are often ignored when we tell one story about them, when we tell a story of deficit. It ignored the fact that our teachers were incredible role models that took interest in us and had a lot of pride in what they did, and that meant so much. So A lot of my work is really committed to a deeply held belief in the marrow of my bones that every child has so much to offer, and it is our society that is really responsible for creating conditions that allow a village to support every child's promise and potential.
Beautiful, beautiful journey from getting glimpses of a young Renee and then how you were shaped. And I know this work goes to your core. We now know it's in your marrow, it's in your soul. And that's really remarkable. And, you know, you talk, I was on your website, we had a retreat last week, and I came across this quote that I don't remember seeing. And at Vital Village, you talk about, quote, beyond the safety net, weaving our community tapestry to support every child. And so I was saying to my team, like, oh, that's such a beautiful metaphor. And we talk about these multiple layers of safety nets. And you're saying, yes, we need those safety nets, and let's go beyond and weave this tapestry. And then I said to Katie, our comms person, I'm like, what's the name of the award that we gave Renee? And she goes, Community Weaver. So you know, it is so perfect. So this award that we have given you, our inaugural recipient, is presented to a community-based collaborator who is fostering social trust by celebrating diversity, promoting inclusion, and cultivating a sense of mattering for all. You know, this is so well deserved, but I'm interested in, from that description, you've already brought some pieces to light, but what really resonates for you within that?
It's the word. I'm very humbled by it, and I would say that, you know, it's impossible for an individual to receive that type of award. You know, this is really a award that I would only accept on behalf of the work that we've done collaboratively in Vital Village. That quote that you read was developed by our design team when we were trying to think of our mission statement. And what we spent so much time thinking this through, and the tapestry and the weaving is so intentional of really allowing everyone to bring their gifts, everyone to feel a sense of belonging, everyone to see that together, collaboratively, we can all make a contribution. And that's really the power and beauty of a tapestry, right? That allows for us to embrace different colors, different textures, different styles, different ways of leading and showing up, different cultural backgrounds and beliefs. You know, and if we make a space for belonging, where everyone can feel as though they have something important to offer and that they have something important to learn, that mutuality, that space of belonging really allows us to expand. And I think it's deeply needed because the diversity of opinions and ways of thinking is really important to allowing a village to take on a task of investing in every child. It can't just be one way or just one model or just one idea. There has to be a space for discussion, exchange, and embracing of many different types of ideas. So our work is really focuses on servant leadership. How can we be in a very humble posture, working to serve and build a greater trust and investment for all children and families to thrive? And in order to do that, we have to be very open to listening, very open to ideas and innovations and strategies that may differ from the ones we have in our own heads, and really invest in the collective work as opposed to a more dominant style of leadership where there's one leader and everyone else is, you know, kind of playing these different roles, really creating a community where anyone can lead, and that allows sustainability, that allows and prevents any one person from becoming exhausted, overworked, overtired. And it really allows us to sustain and have the momentum needed for social transformation, because we know that there's much work to be done, and it will take time.
So let's do a little deeper dive into your work at Vital Village in 3 Boston communities, and you've gone beyond that, and we'll talk about that. But you had this front row seat to some extraordinary work and impactful work and collaborative whole community-based work. Introduce us to some of that, however you choose.
Yeah. Our work really begins with listening, right? And a mindset that there are solutions that exist already within communities, that they're assets and strengths. And if we could create a platform and a network and an environment that welcomes, expects, and hopes to create an environment to see and learn from those strengths, our goal would really be to help scale and sustain those, and to help align them and integrate them in intentional and meaningful ways, to reduce silos. So our work really involves 3 basic things. The first idea is co-design, beginning with an idea that there are already working solutions within communities. And if we center residents, parents, and leaders within communities, we are best positioned to then continue to lift up those strategies and that capacity to support every family and every child. The second piece of our work really thinks about intentional cross-sector collaborations and coalition building. So how do we really break down silos that really don't serve our collective goals well? And that connects very much to the third piece of our work, which is shared data, shared information. And very much in that work, we center community leaders as those evaluators and researchers, and center their ideas, stories, and narratives. A very brief example of this would be at the start of the pandemic. We had a group of volunteers in the community that were holding drop-in baby cafes, drop-in sites for parents to receive support and engagement. The beginning of the pandemic, the in-person stopped. And it was that group at the leading edge of moving to a virtual platform. In less than 3 weeks, they were up on a virtual platform because they knew that while COVID-19 as a virus, as an infection was threatening, social isolation is deeply threatening to families. And their primary goal was to maintain social connections and support.
Beautiful story of a community having their answers and having those resources, and will blossom when they're upheld in those ways. More on pandemic response and trauma-informed community work when we come back. Stay tuned.
Today, more than ever, you need fast, reliable internet. At Mediacom, we want you to know you can count on us. Our fiber-powered 100% gigabit technology network was built for the future. We have enormous capacity and power, and 99.99% network reliability. So even though these are uncertain times, we're prepared, and you can be certain we'll keep your world connected.
Hi, I'm Dr. Mollie Marti, and welcome back to Resiliency Matters in this conversation with Dr. Renée Boynton-Jarrett. Renée, we were just talking a bit about the pandemic, and we have seen ramped up stressors, new traumas, a lot going on with children and families struggling through the pandemic. What are some things that you think we really need to start tending to if we are going to fuel this collective recovery?
Thank you so much for that question. I think we have not focused enough or spoken enough around the local leadership and successes. There have been a tremendous number of innovative ideas and strategies to expand and maintain social connections, to build and support families amidst numerous hardships. And I think there's so many lessons. We've also learned some really challenging lessons as decisions and plans were made around how resources would be allocated if they became sparse, how testing, how screening, how vaccinations roll out, and prioritization that really cause some deeper conversations about who are the decision makers and who are not included in decision-making processes. So I think there's a real opportunity to create pathways to sustain those local community leadership aspects that have grown during this pandemic, and to formalize them so that decisions are not made with kind of a narrow group of stakeholder opinions, but that those closest to the challenge are also really given access to the power to make decisions that inform their local communities, their families, and context and well-being. So we could do so much more to formalize local engagement in an authentic way with community partners. And there's more that we need to learn from what has been successful and what has leveraged important assets within communities. Obviously, there is a tremendous amount of work to do around sustainable long-term policies and deep investments in all of the things we know help children and families thrive. Health benefits, leave benefits, paid leave, early care and education that is affordable, health and other benefits for early care and education providers, opportunities to robustly support schools, and obviously really comprehensive and accessible and proactive mental health and behavioral health resources for all members of our communities. All members. Everyone has been impacted by this pandemic. Everyone has been impacted by the racial reckoning that we've engaged in over the past few years in a different way. And it is really important that we prepare for a long-term and sustained a process for addressing what we are calling right now a mental health crisis for children and youth. That will outlive in terms of its length, its duration, and its impact, the COVID-19 pandemic. So we need to massively restructure where and how mental health resources are invested in proactively and comprehensively.
You know, Renee, if you'd like to use this platform to kick off your campaign for president, go ahead. I'll be your manager. So much wisdom and compassion in your response. And, you know, you, again, have a front row seat to this because not only are you working deeply in your own Boston community, but you also now have this NOW Forum, which stands for Networks of Opportunity for Child Wellbeing. Tell us a bit about this national work.
Yeah, so NOW really aims to bring communities together for peer exchange and learning. So there's tremendous learning that can happen when you're working at a local level. You can almost telescope into that local level, but being able to learn from a peer community in a different geography that may be facing similar challenges or may have addressed some of the same challenges you're working to address right now is powerful learning. We know a lot of the work that happens around shared governance, decision-making strategies, equity tools and models community engagement that is authentic and with dignity is not necessarily, can't just look in books and find all of those strategies and solutions. That research, although it is there, has not been done to the extent to which other evidence-based research has been invested in. And there is so much that is learned, that can be learned from a peer community. So the Now Forum really creates a community-led forum where peer communities can exchange resources, curate ideas and resources, and help to mobilize and accelerate local parent and caregiver leadership, as well as local community social transformation. So, you know, for a lot of community coalitions, they're really trying to understand, what does it mean to embrace a trauma-informed model, a resiliency-based model? What are healing-centered practices? What does it mean to bring in an anti-racist framework? And how does that engage with addressing ACEs? So these are questions that are being interrogated everywhere. And so our forum is really bringing together a shared space where there's not judgment or blame or shame, but there's the opportunity to learn from each other and to accelerate change and adapt models that may be helpful to your local context.
I love how many times you just said learning, because it is this process of saying, you know, there's so much we don't know, especially where we are in this evolution of a global pandemic to an endemic. And there's so much we don't know when we are wisely shifting from this model where we come in, the experts come in with the answers, versus creating that space to ask the community what they need, and to create those spaces where we can help bring forth all the wisdom and gifts that they bring. So it's such a learning process. I know I feel like I've been a student more than ever, you know, over these last couple of years. And I want to share another quote from your Now website, because it asks this question: what would it look like if communities ensured every child, parent, resident, and family equitable access to critical resources and opportunities to lead healthy, thriving lives, and a seat at the table to drive the solutions? So anything else you want to expand on that, or share an example of some inspiring work? We certainly will put websites here so we can invite our viewers to visit your websites and your resources and get engaged from their place in their own communities.
I think that quote is really talking about the move from a charity-based model to a model that really centers the dignity of members of the community and centers the dignity of children. So, you know, equity is really like having everything you need to thrive, and it not being withheld based on income, based on race, ethnicity, based on language, based on immigration status, sexuality, and how those identities intersect. But we exist in a society where those factors end up mattering for what you do and do not receive. You could take any example. We could take food. We live in a society where food has to be purchased, and food that isn't purchased is thrown away rather than distributed. So what does that mean when we have children who are hungry or have insufficient food, chronically food insufficient, but we also have a society where food will be thrown away instead of distributed? So that is a series of choices we've made, a set of mindsets that we have that inform those policies, practices, and choices. And if we created an environment where we really trusted that members of the community have something to offer, something important to say about how food should be distributed locally, about how enrichment opportunities should happen for children or families, about when and how they receive their health care, that would really be embracing the dignity of each member and all that they have to offer, really embracing that they're full humanity. Their ideas may differ from yours, but as a human, as a person, they have the right, the freedom, the ability to express and contribute joyfully in a variety of ways. And so for our work, that's really the North Star, is how do we kind of go beyond equality, go beyond equity to really anchor dignity and really understand the ways in which dignity really allows all of us to flourish. And there are numerous examples that often come down to the small phrase of hurt people, right? And so a lot of, if you can from the earliest moments of life, invest, promote, respect the dignity of each person, their social connections, their attachments, their contributions. Imagine the ways in which they will continue to connect with others, the ways in which those cycles can happen. But a society that kind of neglects, avoids protecting, avoids or fails to truly support the promise of each individual, what are ways in which individuals may continue to act? So it becomes really powerfully important as we think about why it is so important to think beyond just what individuals can do differently, beyond what just parents and caregivers can do differently, but what can we as a society do to support healthy communities where everyone can thrive, where everyone has the resources and opportunities accessible to them to really thrive and to contribute.
Everything you do that I have seen, and you presented at our summits, we've had these conversations. Your work really focuses on those community-based strategies that are two-pronged, and I just want to drive this point home as we close out here, to reduce child maltreatment, right? Trauma-informed lens, reduce the harm, figure this stuff out, and there's plenty of work to do there, all the way from systems to individual families, and also to promote child well-being. And you're housing all of that on the dignity of every child, every person, every parent and community member. So thank you for this time when people are really wanting to understand and know that there are opportunities that this pandemic has brought. It has been tough, and there are opportunities, and where do we start? This is the conversation we'll offer to them as a starting point. So thank you so much for your time today and your wisdom, Renee. Congratulations on your award. And thank you, viewers, for joining us on Resiliency Matters on MediaCom NC22, your local programming leader.